Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Leader podcast. I am really thrilled and excited by my guest today because it's a subject that I find personally fascinating. And I'm joined by Angela Genoni, who is a Perth-based nutritionist and gut microbiome expert. And I can't wait to ask you just what on earth is the gut microbiome expert? And Angela has got over 20 years worth of experience in health space, holding a PhD no less in human nutrition, and now runs Gut Science, supporting individuals and corporate teams to really understand how gut health truly impacts energy, our focus, our mood, overall well-being, and of course with all of that our performance overall. So I couldn't think of I think more fitting conversation, particularly maybe at this time of year too. We're sort of in early September and we can start to get to that almost, I'm going to say, cruel to the end of the year, where a calendar year at least, where, you know, we've all worked hard for the entire year and now we're maybe running low on energy. So I think not a perfect timing from that sense too. But Angela, welcome to the podcast and thank you so
for having
much.
me. I'm very excited to have a chat with you.
Yeah, and thank you for your time. I know we're all, particularly you, busy doing all sorts of things and working through your programs with and your patients. I don't know, do you call them patients? Clients, I guess.
Yeah.
I instinctively said patients there, but with your clients. So, Angela, I would love to know a little bit, first of all, just sort of like how you got into this space.
Well, it's quite an interesting story actually, because I love what I do and I love the science of nutrition, and I've been a nutritionist, for a long time, for 20 years or over 20 years now. But when my kids were little, I kind of wanted to go back to work, and I knew that, the world of scientific research would be an interesting area for me to get into. And the best way to do that is to obviously do postgraduate studies. So I went back to uni when my kids were little and did an honours degree, and that led into my PhD. And I wasn't entirely sure about researching the gut because I knew that I would be in the lab with literal poop samples for a few years. But hands down, it was the best thing I've ever done in my life. It was so much fun. I just learned so much, and now I get to share that passion and that love with everyone, as part of my now business. So it was a journey that started a little by accident, but one that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, okay. So you were a nutritionist kind of all along in your
Yes.
professional career, and then the idea to more specialize then, would I say, in the gut and gut microbiome was the kind of later addition almost.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess even when I started my PhD, I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to do with it at the end. The whole idea for having my own business out of it has something that has evolved, in the last 5 years. And yeah, I just felt like there was a big gap for the science around the gut is really complex, but I don't think science generally does a good job of communicating the so what to people to help them actually apply some of that cool stuff in real life. We get the clickbait articles now and again on our news feeds, but the individual articles in isolation don't help us actually put the pieces together, and that's what I felt was my calling, to kind of get out there and help people actually understand their body on a deeper level on the inside, to build up that empowerment and confidence on the outside.
Yeah, yes, yeah. Because you see, I don't know, from my perspective as a lay person, I think the conversations around the gut and gut health and even gut microbiome, I mean, it may be just because I personally am interested in it, so I see it, or when you're buying a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere, maybe it's a little bit of that going on for me. But I think, is it fair to say that the general conversations publicly around gut health have become more prevalent over the last whatever years now? I don't know. I want to say like 5 to 6 years in my own experience. But it's a confusing world still, right? Like you said, there's so much out there, and it's like don't eat this, don't eat that, only eat this. And,
Yeah.
the whole world of sort of diet and nutrition can be super confusing.
Yeah, and it is very confusing, and that kind of overwhelm can just means people put it in the too hard basket, and rightly so. When someone says one thing and another person says another thing, it really is like too much sometimes. And then you've got the problem of people who are only saying that thing because they're trying to sell you something. Then it becomes more and more clouded, and you don't know what they're saying is true, or is it just because they're trying to sell you a $200 supplement? Like it's very grey, and I just thought there's real need to get out there and fill those gaps in knowledge, but be a completely independent voice to science without any affiliations or brand partnerships or any of that. So it's just good science with compassion and kindness for the human body. And that's, like, at the end of the day, we all need to appreciate what our body can do on a much better level.
Yeah. So when we say gut health, like, it's a term, for me, like I said it before, it just rolls off the tongue. But what do we really mean by it?
So that is part of, like, my whole point for my business, really, because we say gut health, but do we know what that means? And
Yeah.
like, what does that look like? Where are we talking about?
Yes.
So, the digestive system is something that a lot of people probably didn't learn about or haven't looked at in the past 20, 30 years since they were at school or did biology or whatever it was where they learned about the human body. And the digestive system is quite long, but when we're talking about the gut microbiome, we're talking about the collection of bacteria that live in our digestive tract. And primarily they live right at the end of our digestive tract, which is the colon. And I call it like a compost bin because it's like where our human cells are finished with all the food that we've eaten. And so the leftovers go through to the colon, and that's where the majority of our bacterial friends live. And they rely on those leftovers for their dinner. And if we're not feeding them properly, then they can't help us back in return and produce those beneficial compounds that our body has become to rely on. Because, it's a beautiful ecosystem in there. And just like a rainforest, humans and the bacterial profile that's in there have evolved to have this beautiful relationship where we rely on each other. And so if they're not getting their food properly or getting fed well enough, they can't help us in return. So it goes both ways.
How interesting. So because I think bacteria, and to me bacteria is like, we don't want bacteria. It sounds like a bad thing, right? Like, but what you're saying is that,
yes.
yeah.
That's partly the thinking of science when we grew up. When we came through high school and early university days, the gut microbiome was something that was completely dismissed. Science knew there was this whole collection of bacteria in there, but the significance of those friends were completely like, oh, they don't do anything. They're just innocuous. They sit there, they don't do anything. But now, since I did my PhD, actually, the explosion in literature around the gut is fantastic, and the technology that we have to actually look at the types of species that are there has really improved. And yeah, it's so cool. It's really cool, but very complex.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I can only begin to imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you've done a whole PhD in this space, so just goes to show in and of itself. And so what I love what you said there is bacteria are our friends in
Yes.
in terms of the gut. So that's good. And so you said it's like this, the rainforest ecosystem, sort of, what are we doing for them? What are they doing for us? So what are they doing for us? What's the benefit, I guess, of having these bacteria there, these friends?
Okay, so without these guys in our gut, firstly, we would be pooping an awful lot more than we do already, because they break down all of those leftover food components so that the volume that's left over is greatly reduced. Similarly, like, if you've got a compost bin at home, you know that over a few weeks, the volume that's in there is in the compost pile, it greatly reduces as it all gets broken down. So that's the first role of the bacteria that are in there. But as they do that, so bacteria primarily eat fibre, but as they eat the fibre, they in themselves will poop, and their poops are like tiny little molecules because they're only single-celled organisms. Their little poops actually are utilised by our human body, and the byproducts that come specifically from eating fibre are very anti-inflammatory, and it was thought that they only had an effect while they were in the colon, but we now know, we've got better technology, we now know that these molecules travel far and wide in the body and they can impact everything. So we're talking the bones, the amount of inflammation in our lungs, say for asthma, your inflammatory markers in other places in your body. Those byproducts that come from the bacteria in our gut can influence just about every part of our health journey. And that can be the case even if you don't have any gut issues. You don't have to have gut issues to get benefit from eating fibre, because the compounds that are produced are so beneficial to the body. You can still find that you get other benefits, like you sleep better or you feel better.
Yeah, and is it a case of almost prevention too? I don't know,
Yes,
but
yes.
like sort of we've got to maintain that ecosystem, that bacteria level in order to not get the more negative things. Is that fair to say? Is that sort of how it works? Yeah.
Yeah, so what we know from a lot of research on a lot of different health conditions is that health is associated with a greater microbiome diversity. And when we talk about diversity, we're meaning like the amount of different species that are there and the way that they're distributed. So if we've got a lot broader range of bacteria there and they have a fairly even distribution across themselves, then that's a good diversity. So what happens if you've got some kind of health condition, and it can be any health condition really, what we see is that the diversity in those health conditions is quite reduced when we look at it compared to healthy populations. So, and it's not really clear if that's a cause or an effect. It's probably a bit of both, but the way to reduce your risk over time is to have a more diverse bacterial profile in your gut, and the way to do that is to eat a diverse range of plant foods, because we need to feed all the different types of bacteria, and there's like over 1,000 different species in there, so it makes sense that we have to feed all of them. We have to feed them all a wide range of foods so that they can all thrive.
Oh, wow, 1,000.
Yeah, more than. There's more than.
More
And
than,
there's also
okay.
like viruses and archaea and fungi. There's a whole ecosystem.
Yes.
But science mainly focuses on the bacterial profiles at the moment, and we probably will see more research into the other things at some point. But for now, the bacterial profiles are very important.
Yeah, okay. And so you mentioned, so we need to maintain the diversity of the bacteria, then we need to eat a diverse range of foods. In particular, you say plant foods.
Yes.
And you talk around fiber. So is it really that we should be focused specifically on fiber stroke, therefore plant foods?
Yes.
Or so, I'm gonna say like carbohydrate, protein doesn't have an impact here, or what's the...
Yeah, so this is where it can get quite overwhelming and confusing.
Yeah, sure.
So the beneficial bacteria eat fibre, so that the evidence on that is very clear. The fibre is only found in plant foods. So it's the cell walls of the plants that contain the fibre, and some of those are inside the cells as well. But just to confuse the issue, bacteria will also eat other things as well if they're hungry. If they haven't got enough fibre to eat, they will eat, your gut lining and things that they shouldn't be eating. But under the definition of fibre, and this is where people can get very confused, is because fibre is one word, but it is hundreds of compounds. So when I say fibre, I mean eat plants, because when you eat plants and from lots of different places, you're getting that diverse range of fibre, because they're all different types, they're all different chemical structures, they're all different shapes, and they all feed different types of bacteria, like a cat. You know, cats are very fussy with their diet. They'll eat, you know, their favourite cat food, but they'll only eat the second choice if they're really hungry. And I guess your bacteria are pretty similar to that. They have a favourite. They'll eat their second choice if they're starving, but we don't really want that.
Yeah, okay, I love that. I do have a cat, so
You know they're fussy.
I can picture that. Yeah,
Yeah.
when I've run out of, like, you know, the normal food, and I sneak down something else that I've just managed to buy quickly, and it just
Yeah, they
sits
go,
there for days.
no. So
Literally
what
sits
is
there
this? No, we're not eating that.
for days until I play
Yeah.
standoff and I say, "You're eating it." Yeah. And she does eventually. Yeah, poor thing. Yeah, okay. I'm such a cruel person, but it's a good analogy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So it is important for us to be thinking about everything that we're eating, because if we're not feeding our bacteria the right things, the right fibers, and the right diversity, then it will eat other things, but it's not necessarily
Yeah.
going to be the best for us.
And there are bacteria that will eat, you know, the proteins and the fats that are left over from what we've eaten, and that, you know, that's part of having a normal diet, because some of those things will end up in the colon. But I guess it's a fine balance, because we know that the breakdown products from fibre and fat in the colon are not necessarily beneficial, and so that's where it has to be, you know, fine balance, because if there's too much protein and fat in the colon in the absence of fibre, then we get too many sort of detrimental things happening in there, which is not likely to produce good health outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm not anti any diet except for one that does not contain fibre, because
Yes.
you can't really have a healthy gut microbiome environment without consuming fibre and
Got it.
plant foods. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. Well, I like plant foods. I'm not vegetarian, but I often say that I could be, right? Like
Yeah.
I love that, I guess, spectrum of food and all sorts. But that's good to hear. I reckon my fiber intake is pretty solid. But let's shift it into, or our conversation rather, into the idea then of how that all just impacts our energy. If we think, I know you do, Andrew, a lot of work with individuals, of course, but also corporate teams and organizations, and helping them to see the importance of this for their energy, productivity, overall performance, and, you know, well-being and pieces. So how do they actually interconnect? How does that sort of add up in maybe
So I
simple
guess
terms?
most people have heard about the gut-brain axis, right? And I guess this is part of the equation here, because the better that we feed our gut, the more of those beneficial metabolites are produced. And part of the role of those beneficial metabolites is to affect our mood and our sleep and our energy levels, and it can impact our ability to exercise and to sustain exercise, and our muscle mass. So it's not really something that we could ignore, because it plays a huge role in how we feel generally. And I think, you know, yourself, you know, everyone knows when you're struggling or you're a bit under the weather, you've got a cold, or you're just feeling a bit off, you know your productivity's not great that particular week or that particular day, because you just feel a bit meh. And it's not sometimes until you feel better or feel like you're at that next level that you realise, oh wow, I could be doing so much more right now if I was operating at this level a bit more often. And some people, you know, we're busy lives and we often get stuck in our routines, and it's really nice when you can make a few changes and sustainable changes, and then realise, oh, I'm sleeping better, I'm feeling better, and oh wow, how much more have I got done this week? And that has to be part of the conversation, particularly in corporates, because we spend a lot of time at work and in that office environment, And if we're on the same page with wanting to nurture our bodies, or we're doing it together, that is a good thing to do too. We do it as a community group, then we're more likely to get results and we feel better. And in fact, sometimes you can work less because you can be more productive with the time that you have. And that's a win-win too, because, you know, we all could benefit mentally from having a bit more time to do exercise and to spend time with family as well. So it has to be all part of the discussion, because yes, gut health is the centre of how we can manage some of those things, but it brings on other benefits as well that can be incorporated into any workplace.
Yeah, like you say, just that level of sleep, the level of energy, focus. I mean,
Yeah,
I know myself for sure. You say around having sort of colds and, or just weeks where you're lower in energy. And, I can typically tell if it's, if it is actual an illness like a cold or something
yeah,
versus a virus versus I just haven't slept well, or it's just been the weekend and I had pizza and beers
yeah, and you can
versus
feel that.
you
Yeah,
feel that. I mean,
yeah,
I know that it's kind of a thing. You say, oh, I used to be able to when I was younger, and I can do that less now that I'm older. I don't know if there is any logic in that at all or not, but certainly I feel that now, and I'm sure many
mm,
people listening would too. The impact of what we put in here in our mouths, just on how we feel up here in our heads and through our entire body. It's it's undeniable for sure, isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And it's, yeah, once you've made a few small changes yourself, and it's not till you start noticing yourself how you're feeling and that, the impact that it can make in your life, that's when you start going, oh, okay, yeah, you get
Yeah.
it. But you don't often get it until you've done it yourself, and then you see, okay, this is where it's at, because it can be a bit of a game changer if, someone wants to get to that next level or just wants to be able to do more. Then stepping back actually to nurture yourself better can just be the thing that you needed to do to get you there.
Yeah. And you mentioned confidence, I think, at the start of our conversation, Angela. How do you find that into place?
So this is a big part of what I do, and I do think this is like one of the key things that nutrition has got wrong in the last 20 years. So, and I suppose many of your listeners may have watched that Biggest Loser documentary on Netflix at the moment, but
I actually
we,
have, you remind me.
yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
we have really shamed obesity and made obesity a calorie excess problem, and really tried to manage that by calorie restriction, and talked about that as purely a maths problem. We've got to cut down calories, and I don't think nutritional science as a whole really stopped to consider the impact mentally that has on people. And now we've got a whole generation of people beyond that where we only care about restricting ourselves and looking a certain way in the mirror. And we have forgotten to educate ourselves about how our body works on the inside. And education is empowerment, and the science is very clear on that. And particularly for women, education is power, right? But if we have a bit more education and understanding of what our body's doing when we eat and how it works and why it does that, then we can nurture ourselves for the right reasons and stop focusing on restriction rather than, and so we can give ourselves goals that are positive, like I want to run 5Ks, I want to do a pull-up, I want to get my cholesterol in check, So we're doing things for positive reasons rather than for restriction reasons. And that builds confidence. And that self-confidence then flows over to the workplace and to home and to relationships and to, as you do more, you can do more. And that's a spillover effect. And I think we really need to change the message around the way we do nutrition, because it doesn't benefit people to tell us that we have to cut things out all the time, rather than let's focus on the positives of what we can do.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And as you're saying that, I'm thinking back. I'm going to say 5, maybe 6 years ago now, probably about 5 years ago. I actually did a gut microbiome test. I was
Oh,
working with
yep,
a naturopath nutritionist or
yep,
nutritionist naturopath, whichever way around they would go at the time. And we did a gut microbiome test, and off the back of that, it was all sorts of um, well, look, it was all sorts of restrictions. I'll be honest. It was a detox of no gluten, no sugar, no alcohol, no caffeine, no dairy. You might be like, what? But anyway,
yeah,
that's what we did. That's what we did. And but with that too, additional supplements. So it was like
yeah,
I felt amazing. I
yeah,
felt so good. I felt so energized. I was sleeping amazingly. I felt great through my body. I lost weight, but I would say a lot of that was sort of inflammation
yeah,
and whatever else. And I had clarity of thought, and I absolutely felt more confident without a doubt. And it wasn't just because of how I felt in the mirror. It
mm,
was, if I think back, it was that I was more productive. And so almost as I could do more, I felt
more confident. Yeah,
more confident.
yeah,
Yeah, sort of that, that step. And I know a lot of listeners for, this podcast will be in that space of, being high achieving, striving for more, always wanting to do more, rightly or wrongly, and moving forward. And that feeling of sort of being productive and hitting goals is a really good thing. It gives that a sense of achievement and so on. So you're absolutely right. When I'm hearing you say that, I'm thinking back to my own experience in that, and other times too when I would have just been eating well consistently, exercising consistently, and the two marry up obviously to be able to allow us to be more productive and all that good stuff, and just well generally. For sure, I can absolutely see the correlation there into confidence, but not just in terms of how we necessarily feel when we look in the mirror, as much as, if I'm honest, and that is a part of it for me for sure. I think most women want to be able to feel confident when they look at themselves in the dress, the jeans, the mirror, or what have you. But without doubt, more than that for sure. Really
yeah.
interesting.
And I think looking in the mirror and being kind to yourself is part of the journey too. Like, you're building confidence by giving thanks for what your body can do at this time, even if it's not where you want to be. You still can do many things that other people don't get the opportunity to do. We live in these first world problem era where we don't stop and be grateful enough for what we have and what our body can do. And if we just reframe some of those messages to ourselves and think about the types of things that we want to achieve, which are for us, for our soul, and for our purpose, then that becomes a hugely more positive motivator for making change rather than a superficial goal of losing weight.
Yes.
And yeah, that's the superficial goals of losing weight is not going to be successful in the long
Yeah.
run. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's I'm a high achiever as any of your listeners, and I can vouch for the fact that personally, when you've got goals that are something positive, then you're more motivated to go after them, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure. And it's the intrinsic motivation versus the
Yeah,
extrinsic
yeah,
external forces,
exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah,
The if I don't do this, then I
yeah,
won't be liked. If I don't do this, then I won't be appreciated or valued in the world or my workplace or my relationship or what have you, versus the doing it for a
yourself.
purpose which goes
Yeah,
way beyond that. Yeah, way
yeah.
beyond that, which is typically something that is going to serve you on a deep level or a deeper level. So true. Yeah,
Yeah,
so true.
and when your energy is in the right place and it's focused on nurturing yourself, that just radiates out to everybody else too. So, you might think it's selfish to spend some time looking after yourself, but you end up you're a better leader at work. You just relate to people in the office better. You have more fun at home with the kids. That those things all go hand in hand together.
Yeah, well, I talk around contagious leadership, and within that, one of the pillars that I talk around is contagious energy, and
Yeah,
exactly that
yeah,
reason.
yeah.
It is that ripple effect, and we all know it. My goodness, how if you are a leader and you're showing up in whatever capacity that is, at home as mum versus in work as the general manager, whatever capacity, if we're having to fake the energy all the time because we don't have it, but yeah, I'm the leader, so I've got to kind of show up and put it on. That's just exhausting too, right? So, well, even more tiring. So, you're absolutely right. That ripple effect is so contagious, quite literally in that sense, and has such a positive impact on others if we get it right. If we're having to fake it all the time, people see straight through it most of the time
They
too.
do,
Right?
and that's we might not realise it, but people are very perceptive generally, and the people that are very authentic with their passions, it shines through over and above, and the leaders that walk the walk in terms of wanting to encourage their teams to be healthy and be the best versions of themselves are the ones that you want to be around, the ones that you want to go the extra mile for, and the ones that where you as a team can just produce some phenomenal outputs because you're working well together and you've got some inspirational leadership to look up to.
Yeah, it's the inspiration, and sometimes the ideas. If you've got somebody that's doing something as a leader that you would never have thought to do, I don't know, maybe eating in a certain way or moving in a certain way, whatever it might be, and you take the idea and the inspiration from that, and you do the same, and you'll feel great. I mean, again, it's such a positive example and story to be able to tell, isn't it? So,
Yeah, it is, and it's just lovely to see, people come out of their shell as they sort of start to get things right for them. And that's the thing that I really encourage people to do is be the master of their own nutrition and not follow someone else's diet plan because that just encourages you to feel guilty on day 2 or 3 because it's too hard. So following your own heart and your lifestyle to manage those things can be difficult but is very rewarding.
yeah. And so what are some of the things, Angie? I mean, I know the answer to this question is probably like, well, how long's a piece of string? And it's particular to everybody. So, if it's too hard to answer, then please do tell me, but tell us. But what are some of maybe the more simpler, I don't know, more basic things that anybody can be doing to support their gut, to support their energy and performance and all that good stuff?
So I guess the easiest, firstly, I should say that I don't ever advocate for people changing their diet too drastically at once because, firstly, we know from research around diets that changing too much at once is not likely to be successful. So don't do that. It's too hard anyway. I advocate for people just making one small change at a time. It gives your gut a bit more time to adjust to, and your gut bacteria can adjust very quickly to changes in diet, and the science is quite clear on that, but that does not mean that that's a comfortable thing to do. You can end up, we all know that if we haven't eaten legumes for a while and then we eat a tin of baked beans, we know what happens. So there's clear adaptation happening in the gut when we change our diet, and it happens quickly, but it's more comfortable if we go slowly. So, for the next week or two, if you just change one small thing about your diet to add in, an extra piece of fruit, or change up your breakfast to have, some more whole grains, or make the bread a bit more grainy, or switch up and have some oats or something instead, then those are just such simple changes to make, but can have a pretty strong ripple effect to how you're feeling and then what you choose to eat for the rest of the day because you're feeling more full or your tummy's feeling more comfortable, or you might even notice that you're sleeping better just after a small change because an extra couple of grams of fibre might just be the thing that tipped you over into starting to feel better. So it doesn't have to be big changes to start making a difference, and then we stack some changes together and then suddenly your diet turns around pretty quickly.
Yeah, I love that. So small changes. I knew that when I told you that my, 6 years ago was no gluten, no this, no that. And you're like, alarm bells.
Well, I should say that the microbiome testing that is available now is probably on the next level up. So we use a different technology now, which is a lot more targeted and a lot more exacting, and the recommendations are never likely to be quite so harsh these days because we've got to have a better picture of what's happening inside there. Not that I advocate for getting testing done, and I usually don't recommend it for clients unless they are having, issues that we can't resolve with diet alone.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
sometimes it's good to understand if there's something specific happening in there.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is interesting because I think for me, when I think back, it was a recommendation, or not even a recommendation, a suggestion maybe. And I was just personally like, yes,
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's
Let's
cool
do this.
science. Why not? Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I mean, it
know.
wasn't cheap, right? But it was an interesting process. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that for you, your approach is not to rely on that and actually
Mm.
just to, follow. Well, how do you do it? Is it just sort of instinctual based on symptoms that somebody might be presenting with in that sense, perhaps?
Yeah, and I guess the reason I don't usually recommend testing is exactly that, is because a lot of the time the recommendations to fix whatever the problem is are going to be the same. And so we start with diet first because, one, it's easier, it's cheaper. Like microbiome testing can be $500 or something these days, so it's not cheap. And also it's less stressful too. And if there's the symptoms are not resolving or we can't get to the bottom of it, then and the other things have already been ruled out, then yes, it might be worth a try. But generally, dietary changes can fix whatever the issue is, and it might be, different fibres have different effects on the gut microbiome, and the location of which they are fermented in the gut can change. So if, someone's getting sensitive to apples or so on, those are things that sometimes we can manage with just combining the fibre with different foods to try and sweep it down a bit further down the colon. There's a lot of things we can play with to try and improve symptoms without reducing the fibre intake.
Yeah, really interesting. And so for the work that you do, Angela, if someone were to have tried maybe, like you've said, these small changes themselves at home and maybe did or didn't notice some of the shifts positively in themselves and they wanted to work with somebody like yourself, what would they maybe expect when they came to find you? Because you work with individuals and corporate teams, am I
Yeah, so I have developed an education-based program which puts all the pieces of science together. So it's not just diet related. It's helping you understand all those communication pieces between the gut and the brain, and exercise and stress management, because social media likes to focus in on diet and supplements, but really gut health is so complex and so intertwined with every part of our body that we have to approach things at all angles, really, if we want to fix any gut issues that we have. So my program sort of encompasses all of that. So which is an online platform to do that program, and I do have like group sessions in there so people can come along and ask their questions, and also discussion boards where, those random questions that pop in at 2:00 in the morning, you think, oh, I wonder if I should do this. That's something to pop on the discussion boards and ask, because I think nutrition is not great the way we throw information at people, but without helping you apply it in your life. And that's the bit that I want to help people actually navigate, is how to apply that in the actual real life. In your situation, how is that going to work for you? And then that same program is actually the one I implement in the corporate setting. I just combine that with some workshops in addition to, to pad out the content and apply it more in a leadership type setting for leaders. And I've also just published a book which is based on my program. So I have a copy of that here. It's called A Peaceful Gut, Mind and Body.
Peaceful, I love that. I love the imagery too. Yeah, very
So,
colourful.
so it's very much along the lines of putting the pieces of the science together, and it's designed to not be too sciencey. It's designed to help, normal people understand the science of gut health without overwhelming you.
Yeah, I love that. Normal people
Yeah.
like me.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
it's like, yeah, it's easy to get caught up having a science discussion, but really people just want the so what on what to do for their own
Yeah.
life, and that's what I'm trying to, fill the gap for.
Yes, 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 yes. And I so resonate with that. When you said it earlier, the so what, it's like for me, I'm quite the why learner. So
Yeah,
it's like you could tell me, oh, don't eat too much sugar or don't eat sugar, it's not good for you. Okay, why?
yep.
Like, and I want to know the why and I want to know the so what, and then I'll probably stop eating so much sugar. Well, it's
That
like,
and that is the exact reason that I'm doing what I'm doing, because we've forgot that bit. We tell people not to do something, but we forgot to tell them the why.
yeah,
And I think, if people understand better that sugar, we exceed the capacity of our human cells to absorb all that, and half of it goes through to the colon, and the bacteria have a party when they get all that sugar there, and then the type of bacteria that can eat that sugar are not necessarily the good guys, and we don't really want to be feeding them. So that's where the problem is, and if we all understand those things a little bit better, then we can look after ourselves a bit better,
yeah.
or we want to look after ourselves a bit better.
Yes, yeah, and again, I'm the why learner. I'm also the visual learner. So it's like as I see that as you talk around, the bad guys, the bad
Yeah,
bacteria having this party because we've fed so much sugar
yeah,
into the into the
yeah,
gut. I'm like, no, I see that happening,
yeah.
and it just I don't know, like that visual connection of like this goes into my mouth and they have a party and they ruin my life for the next couple of days.
Yeah.
That's a reason to do it less, I think,
But
for
some of
me
those
anyway.
things are very complex, like because generally carbohydrates are very good for your gut microbiome. So it is hard to sort of get the message across, because sugar is a carbohydrate too. So what's the difference? And, there is a difference because it's so small that lots of bacteria can eat it, not just the good guys. And that's where the problem is. And yeah, so it becomes a very tricky conversation, but the so what is the important thing, and the why. And yeah, empowering ourselves with better knowledge of what our body does on the inside just has so many flow-on effects for us generally. The first of which is eating a bit better, and then the second of which is just having more confidence to do many other things that we want to do.
Yeah, yeah, the energy, the confidence, all of those things to actually
Yeah,
unleash, I want to say, ourselves to be able to go and be who we want to be and do what we want to do. Yeah,
yeah.
amazing. Yeah, starts in the gut. But you'll have a phrase, Angela, peak performance starts in the gut. Is that the one that I saw? Yeah, I love that.
Yes, and it's true. Like, yeah, peak performance in any area of your life, you need to be your best self to show up in any area of your life, and being your best self is being healthy, and then that starts in the gut.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Angela, I think we're going to wrap up our conversation there for today. I could keep like talking on this subject for so long, which probably tells me I just need to go and read your book and pick up on some of learn more of the so what around it. It's fascinating subject which I've always been interested in. So yeah, it's just great to hear it more and understand some of the what we can do about it and the so what's, so that maybe for anybody listening they can understand, well, why should I pay more attention to this, or what can I do to maybe improve things for themselves, just that even little bit, right? That can make them feel better, because we know that once we make one change we feel better. If they're anything like me, at least I'm sure it's plenty of your clients too and others out there, it's like you make one change and then you feel better, so then you're more inclined to make the next change and the next change, or to keep going with it, and it kind of compounds really nicely in that way. It's like when I start exercising I want to keep exercising, but if I stop exercising I'm generally in that little spiral. I'm sure it's the same.
Yeah, it is, and making small changes at a time also builds your confidence too, because you're achieving something rather than failing at something.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what we want to.
yeah, it's that self-trust.
Yeah,
Awesome. So
exactly. Yeah.
Angela, where can people find you if they want to follow along with your work or learn more about what you do, or even get your book? Where can we do that?
Everything is on my website, and so I'll pass the link along, and you can perhaps pop that in. And for your listeners, I'll give a promo code for you. If you're interested, you can have 20% off.
Ooh, exciting. Very good. Okay, cool. So I will definitely add those links into the show notes so that people can find that and follow along with the great work that you're doing. But Angela, thank you so much again for your time and your wisdom in sharing with us today. It's a pleasure. And I know we'll keep in touch, but we'll leave it there for today. We'll be back soon for another episode, but thank you, Angela.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. See you soon.
Bye.